Hello and welcome to In the Back Room. I'm Mr. Shank,
And I'm Mr. Woods.
and today we're going to be talking about India. But before we get started, Mr. Woods,
Yes,
if you have something to say,
always. I always have something to say. Temende causa est nescire.
and that is the cue to begin, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so if we're talking about India, let's start with the geography of India. Now, India is surrounded by water on how many sides, Mr. Woods?
That would be three, I guess, if you count the peninsula point of India.
Yeah, so we've got the Bay of Bengal, we've got the Indian Ocean to the south, the Bay of Bengal being to the east, and the west, you have the Arabian Sea. So it's also surrounded by giant mountains, and I just talked about this in my episode of Shankism, how it basically on all corners, India is very secluded. You've got these giant Himalaya mountains to the north or northeast, I guess. Also, I mean, the Himalayas are pretty much taking up half, the entire subcontinent there. So, and then the Hindu Kush would be off to the northwest as well.
And my understanding is that, like, initially, like, we go all the way back to like Pangea type stuff. India was basically floating in what's today the Indian Ocean, and along plate tectonic movement kind of smashed into the continent of Asia, which helped form those Himalaya and Hindu Kush mountain ranges.
I mean, India must have been flying though, because like Himalayas are massive.
Yeah.
Like supersonic.
Mount Everest. This number has stuck in my head now, and I think I'm right with it. It is 28,026 feet, which is just over 5 miles tall.
So I had 29,029 feet.
Ooh.
That was the name. I mean, maybe someone was chipping the top of it off or something. I don't know. Let's ask. Can we ask Alexa?
Yes.
Alexa, how many feet is Mount Everest?
Mount Everest is 29,029 feet.
Yep, you got it.
29,029 feet.
You got it.
So where are you getting your information?
Google.
Google. The Google.
You're trusting Alexa. I'm trusting. Hey,
she probably heard me say it in my episode and just copied what I said.
Now I gotta ask Siri what Siri thinks. I don't remember how to use Siri with its new iPhone though. Maybe. Do I hold it? Oh yes, there's Siri.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Could you please repeat it?
Siri, how tall is Mount Everest?
According to Wikipedia, it's 29,029 feet.
What a source.
What did you say? Wait, was it 29,028 or 29,029?
29,029 feet.
Dude, I swear, Google lied to me. Of course, that's to be expected.
Yeah, per usual.
Misinformation.
Do you want to explain the monsoons? The monsoons always kind of get me. I'm always a little bit on edge.
Yeah. So the monsoons are seasonal winds that draw in various climates. So the summer monsoons are blowing off the Arabian Sea. Why in this graphic they use blue for summer and red for winter is beyond me.
Maybe that's why, yeah.
Yeah, so the summer monsoons come off the Arabian Sea, bring a lot of that damp, very warm air, and you kind of get almost like a hurricane type feel with these windstorms. But of course, lots of rainfall. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 80% of India's rainfall comes during that summer monsoon period. And then on the flip side of that, the winter monsoons, you've got very cold, very dry air blowing from the Himalayas. You actually have glaciers that move up in the regions of the Himalayas, and that cold air helps to freeze and preserve some of the water that's up in those mountains so that when the summer comes, it's able to thaw and feed the rivers.
Dang.
And maybe some reason of that random desert just kind of in the corner of India.
Which one? The Thar?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Thar Desert and the western side.
Mm-hmm.
So, but then you also have I guess we can talk about the rivers as well. And the northwestern, right under the Hindu Kush, is where you have the Indus River. And That's one thing that I discussed too about India. It's kind of easy to remember
Mhm.
all the stuff because you have in India, you have the Indian Ocean, then you have the Indus River, and then the civilizations that are by it, it's the Indus River Valley civilization. So that in is constantly there. But you have it flowing from the mountains, flowing into the Arabian Sea, and then off to the east on the other side by the Himalayas. This is where you have, I say the Ganges, or is it Ganges? I've heard
I say Ganges
Ganges. Okay.
because I don't know how else you would pronounce Indo-Gangetic Plain, like the floodplain there.
Yeah.
Because it would have to be then Indo-Gangetic, which doesn't sound
It
right.
doesn't
So I'm
sound
going with
right.
Indo-Gangetic and the Ganges River.
But you have another major river over there, the Ganges. So you have these, and this is another river valley civilization. We just talked about Mesopotamia. Humans decide it's a really good idea to be close to water. That way, they don't have to walk 40 miles to survive, right? You just set up camp, have your civilization set up a whole city, right? You'll have cities that
Right.
are forming around these rivers. Life is relatively easy by these rivers. So
And
live
especially the Indus River Valley. Like the Indus and Ganges River valleys are some of the most fertile that exist.
Would you say more than the Tigris and Euphrates?
I think John Green would argue more.
Yeah.
Well, so my thing with India is because they are reliable. Because of the monsoons, they kind of flood on schedule.
Mhm.
So it's not you don't have like the I guess the next closest thing would be the Nile Delta region in my mind. Would be
Yeah.
kind of like the
That's
next most fertile, if not more.
that's the apex of rivers right there in fertility. Is it I would say fertility an actual word?
I think it would just be fertility. I don't know.
Fertility almost
Totality.
sounds like Mortal Kombat, like fertility. Fertility.
Oh, so here's something that popped up in my head when I was talking about this week. So you know how there's always discrepancy on whether Alexander the Great conquered India or just conquered to India, right?
Mhm.
That's like always a phrasing thing. So ancient India included the Indus River Valley, correct?
Yes.
However, modern India does not include the Indus River Valley. That's in Pakistan, in
Ah,
modern Pakistan. We know Alexander crossed the Indus River.
right.
So I wonder if he conquered India, as in the Indian peoples that were there then. But when we think about it today, no, he made it to India and then turned around because we're looking at India where it is today versus the India of the time. Like when questions are formatted and stuff,
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if that's where confusion ends up being.
That's what I'm looking at it now, and like I'm trying to think on my end too, like how that would. Yeah, I
Because
don't
like
know.
I know he didn't go further than the Indus. They wouldn't like cross the next river, and so he turned around there and went down the Indus River and into the Arabian Sea.
Mhm.
So he made it that far. That's not disputed, which would have been India in that day, but
Yeah.
today is not India.
Not
It
what
is
we.
to the edge of
Yeah.
India. Right.
Yeah. Interesting.
Food for thought.
Food for thought. Well, there are Harappan Indus civilizations that are here, and on the Indus River, there's these two civilizations. One's the Harappan, the other one's the Mohenjo-Daran, and this is about the year 2500, maybe I think between 2500 BC and 2000 BC that these major civilizations actually were appearing.
Mhm.
And we can't, and I talked about this in the notes too, they're this like advanced civilization for their time, but we don't know really a lot about them. And it's because we can't read their writing. Do you know what
Yep.
their writing looks like?
I think it's like the stamp seals that are on
Really?
that like a dial or a wheel almost to make those imprints. Yeah, I believe that's the case.
Yeah. I wonder if we'll ever figure that out, because I'd be really interested to see, I mean, as you look at the remains, that they have these plumbing systems and gridded streets and strong central government. And didn't they have air conditioning? Not air conditioning like central air, like kind of like we have, but like they
But
formed their
yeah,
houses in certain.
actually like their construction to catch wind to help
Yeah.
cool the homes. Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was there anything else they did that was like impressive and showed their advancement for the time?
I mean, I think just like the city planning itself tells you that you've got to have some type of centralized government. I think that there's evidence of religion, um, like an early some type of early religion, and of course writing because we can't read it, so we know that it's there. But that almost asks you or begs the question of exactly who are these people? How old are they really? Because we're going based off of archaeology. They're roughly in the same time frame as Mesopotamia or Egypt. But we don't actually know anything more about them than just that, what we have found, because we can't read, and it's like there could be more information there to be had.
And they were peaceful people as well because we didn't find many weapons at all. It was mostly like toys and tools and so forth. So this is very fascinating. I'd be really curious one day if we actually figured it out.
Yeah,
But
maybe that's one of our students
I
will
hope so.
solve
Fingers
the
crossed.
mystery.
Go to India and figure it out. Figure it out.
Just go to India. I think that'd be cool.
Yeah, well, that's for my episode. I have to like not only have to finish editing, but my one friend Bishal is going to give his like 3 to 5 minutes on Hinduism and living in India because he's like I mean, he's a prince, but like there's a lot of princes in India.
Mhm.
So I think that's gonna be really cool. So he should have it for me tomorrow, and I'll include that in the episode as well. I did that for my one Jewish friend, Mark, did that.
Mhm.
But yeah, they didn't have any weapons and they're mostly peaceful. And like you said, that they were using stamps, and those stamps and seals were traded with Mesopotamia. So we think around 2500, 2000
Yeah.
BC. So, but we're not entirely, yeah, we can't get it down to like a finite one. And then do you want to talk about how they just kind of disappeared?
Yeah, so we're not exactly sure what happens here, and so that leaves a lot of speculation open to be had. So, like I mentioned, with the plate tectonics, with the actual forming of India, that's going to put you on a fault line, so it could lead to, and there are even today earthquakes and mudslides in India that cause severe and irreparable damage. And on top of that, if an earthquake's powerful enough, you could shift the course of a river just enough to then no longer have means for agriculture there. Could be conquest if they're a relatively peaceful people and they don't really have weapons. You're a soft target waiting to be had by somebody who does. So maybe they were just conquered and exterminated, and that's why we don't have anything. Maybe over farming led them to leave the region. And again, we don't know, and maybe we could know. Maybe the answer's there, but as of yet, we can't read it if it is.
One day, one of our students, I have faith.
Hmm.
Fly to
Maybe.
India. Fly to India. Or walk.
Yeah.
So the Aryan migration. So above, when we learned about Mesopotamia, there's this mountain range called the Caucasus, and there's a new group. So like the Indo-Aryans, I mean, they basically I mean, they're gone. They vanished. They didn't become these new people that are coming in.
Mhm.
As far as we know,
Right.
and around 2000 BC or BCE, depending on your preference, we've got these Indo-Aryans, Indo-Europeans, and they'll get into India. They'll take through that Khyber Pass, like we had. I don't think we mentioned the Khyber Pass actually.
No, we didn't. It's a you can see on the bottom image here. It's that pass, a thin pathway through the mountains in what is today between Afghanistan and Pakistan,
Mhm.
which is I think it's 20 some miles wide, 26, 27, something like that. But basically, just a relatively narrow passageway that gets you between the two spans of the Hindu Kush Mountains in part of the greater Karakoram mountain range there, so that you can get down into the river valley itself.
And they're going to bring in religion, social structure, and writing into what we know as, India and the Hindu religion and everything today. So, religion would be Hinduism, which we're going to talk about here.
Mhm.
which brings us into the social structure, which is the caste system, which relates to the religion. And to write all this stuff down, they had to do this, when we'll talk about here in a moment, the Vedas. So they have all this stemming from basically their religion. Their entire society today dates back to the Aryans in a huge way, based on religion.
And whether this migration was peaceful or not peaceful is left to be determined. I believe the Vedas themselves refer to it as kind of a military expedition into the Indus River Valley. So by that take, it was probably militarily done. But there are those who look at this and recognize it as a peaceful migration and assimilation of peoples. I am not an expert enough to speak on that, and anytime I have made videos or anything like that, I have been roasted alive on the internet for this from both sides. So I'm going to kind of leave it there, muddled somewhere in the middle, and let those with more experience than I actually be able to talk about the Indo-European Aryan migration process. Now, what I will say is that the same Aryan or Aryan peoples that Adolf Hitler in Germany refers to are these peoples. This is the name that he's stealing because they're of their branches of migration. Some of that goes into Greece and Eastern Europe. And so that's why, for example, the swastika is a symbol stolen from this early Hinduism, which, he twists the meaning of to fit his nefarious purposes, and borrowing the names to build this mythos. Everything aside from kind of the basic pieces of the puzzle is completely fabricated on his part. But enough grains of truth lends credence to the myth.
And that swastika, and I talk about this too, is forever tainted.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime, any variation that you see of it, doesn't matter if you're intending to, this means this is the peace one. It doesn't matter at this point anymore. So just don't use it. It's forever tainted, So, yeah, Hitler, the worst.
Literally the worst.
Literally the worst. So, the four major pieces of literature, of Indian literature, that they're writing in Sanskrit, because that's their written language. The big one here is the Vedas. This is their religious text with, hymns and scriptures and all of that. And you have underneath it, I've always kind of like the Rig Veda underneath that. How would you describe that?
So I don't know that it's in the sense of like earliest in the account of the story, because much of this is like creation and the migration of the Aryan peoples into the Indus River Valley, and all of that's kind of included in this. My understanding, at least, is that the Rig Veda is the oldest one of these that has survived. So it's kind of giving one of the maybe more primary sources, but I don't know that all of them that are that are held as sacred are actually originals, or if they're kind of copied to preserve, or what it might be. But the Rig Veda is the oldest, at least as far as time goes. I don't know about fitting into the timeline of the story, but as far as the oldest that has been written, that would be the Rig Veda.
Gotcha. Then the Upanishads, or Upanishads, however you want to say it. This is supplemental text. This is commentary between a teacher and a student on the Vedas. So
it's the For Dummies guide.
Yeah, they're in layman's terms, they're I don't say they're dumbing it down, but they're making it more, they're insightful things like the cliff notes or whatever you want to kind of call it.
Mm-hmm.
But they're, in essence, they're commenting on it. I use the analogy of, if you're watching football and you're watching it on TV and you have like Mike Tirico, or it used to be John Gruden and John Madden and all those guys that are commenting on the football, what's happening. And everything that they're seeing is happening. They're commenting on, right? Oh, he throws a touchdown pass to so and so. Well, that's essentially what the student and the teacher were doing. They were commenting on the Vedas, and that commentary became so insightful or so to the point that it became another part of the text. So, like, imagine that all those commenters, those broadcasters on the NFL, that became like an addition to the game. Like, you have to have the broadcasting. It was so good. And that's kind of how it is with the Upanishads. I think they were like the second edition of commenting.
It's not relatable at all, but that's essentially the way that Averroes, the Muslim philosopher who wrote the commentaries for Aristotle's logic, it's essentially what he did, was kind of have an interaction with that text and tear it apart and try to figure out what's going on and talk about it in a more common way, which is, making it more digestible by more people. So it's that same principle, but nobody's going to make that connection except me sitting here. So it's not really useful to anybody, but
there'll be another person out there, another Woods out there.
One other person out there somewhere in their creepy basement.
You'll get somebody from like Australia listening to, because there's like random people from all over the country or all over the world that like listen to it. It'll be like the 3% that are in like Australia. That, oh, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Meanwhile, in America, well, the audience we're trying to reach is like,
no. Do you want to take the Mahabharata?
Yeah, so the Mahabharata is an actual detailed account of the Aryan migration process or Aryan invasion process, and it details basically like a pseudo-cosmic war that the gods get themselves involved in. And the portion of that's kind of pulled aside there, the Bhagavad Gita, is the climax of the story, but it's explained the concept of Dharma. Now, I'm actually going to hold on to that. I'm going to save that for when we're going through the caste system in Hinduism. I think it'll be more relevant to explain it there, but I'll reference back to this.
Okay.
So rewind if you need to.
Reroute. You want to take Ramayana as well? I mean, these are all like ones that are for like moral guidance for them, like teaching them values and so forth. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Right. Well, no, you're fine, because you're exactly right. The Ramayana is another example of a moral guide, and I believe that's the hero is Rama in the text. And my understanding is it's not so much of like a heroic tale as it's more like how one might view a morality. So in Christianity, right, your attempt is to model the life of Jesus, because he is kind of the moral guide, the moral superior figure, that you want to live your life as he lived, therefore you're doing it the right way. Or like following the Sunnah in Islam, right? That's the kind of the way of the prophet. So you want to live the way that they lived. The Ramayana is essentially that. It's a handbook on how to live a proper and moral life.
Yeah, I use that as well with Christianity. I basically say the same thing. Just, the stories, whether you believe they're true or not, they're for your moral guidance. Like you take that story and you say, okay, well, I get the overall theme here. I get the moral of the story, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what those are. Yeah, so we can move on from the literature. And well, we kind of already talked about all those. It just breaks it down.
Yeah, you're good.
And let's talk about the Hindu caste system. So the Aryans brought this social structure down, and it's a pyramid. Not to be confused with pyramids. Well, I guess in a way, it's kind of a pyramid scheme.
It is
right?
sort of a pyramid scheme.
But so we talk about this in Mesopotamia, I talk about this in Egypt, you have a class system, meaning where do you rank in society? Are you at the bottom with the majority of the population, or are you at the top where you have like kings or priests or something like that? And for most of history, most of us would have been at the bottom and very few of us been at the top. And there really wouldn't have been a whole lot of like there is today, like middle class. Like that's what predominantly makes up, today is middle class. I don't know what the percentage is, but here in America, quite a bit.
Well, that's because your upper class is 1/10 of 1%
Yeah.
of the population. That doesn't leave a lot of room for everybody else.
No, not so much. So at the top, we have Brahmin, which this always confuses the kids because we're going to talk about Brahma, or I've even spelled it with the Brahmin with an A as well. So I've seen like multiple spellings, and that kind of always trips them up, and sometimes even me. But if you're at the top of the food chain here, you're at the top of the pyramid.
I guess now that I'm looking at it, there's two different spellings just on this slide. There's one in the graphic and one in the writing for Brahmin.
Yeah. Anyways,
we're trying to take a language that isn't written with these letters and make it written with these letters. So that's where the confusion comes from.
Yeah, which is understandable. So if you're at the top, the very, very few percentage there, you'll be a priest or an academic, somebody that has had quite a bit of education, and to get to that point in whatever field, academics or religion. What about the next? If you go down from that, Mr. Woods, one step or one caste below that, what would you have?
Yeah, so directly below the Brahmins, you have the Kshatriya. And so the Kshatriya are the warrior element of society, but this is also your physical leadership. So your king and the princes and all the nobility along with that. And you want to take the next one there? I'm lining myself up to do the peasants.
Yeah, I figure we can just kind of get back and forth with this. The next step below that on this social pyramid would be the Vaishyas, and this is a merchant. So you're a guy or girl, I guess, that would sell products, right? And you're selling merchandise, or you're a landowner. And so you're kind of like, if there was a middle class, this is kind of what you've been born into. So you're not too bad here with that.
The closest thing to a middle class that's possible.
Yeah.
All right. So next up here, we've got the Shudra or the Sudra. And these are your, I guess, basically the lowest caste in reality. They're these are your peasants and your day laborers and your serving people. The very kind of bottom of the system, as it were. And then Mr. Shank, who are those other folks down there?
These are the fine people. Not really. They're the untouchables. They're not even in the system. They're not in the pyramid. They're outside. So those viewers with the PowerPoint in front of them, they'll see what I'm talking about. But it's in its own box. Like, these are the untouchables. They're outside of the caste system. So this is where that term comes from, because this whole system here, this whole pyramid is a caste system. What caste are you into? You're at the top, you're at the bottom. They're so bad, they're not even in the caste system. They are an outcast. And these are the street sweepers, the lantern cleaners, the pooper scoopers. These are the ones where if, say a cow dies, they're the ones going to take care of the body of the cow, because in Hinduism, that's a sacred animal. They don't want to get touched by that. And it's not one of those things where it's, oh, they're untouchable, that's like a good thing, like, you can't touch me, it's a bad thing, where it's you don't want to be touched by them. And for a very long time, these untouchables weren't even allowed out during the day. They're only allowed out during the night. So I mean, imagine that, like, you're in India and then these dirty outcasts come and in the middle of the night sweep the streets, take the lanterns out, replace them, this dirty, messy job, clean up the poop, clean up the dead animals, and trek it away. Kind of like almost like it feels like in my head, it's something like from it's not a movie, but it feels like something you would see like a scary movie, kind of like, like zombies quickly running and taking it away. That's what like runs through my mind. It's like, man. And this is something that Gandhi was, fighting against still. Is this caste system, and they don't have it. They do have it today, but they don't have it today, if that makes
Right.
sense.
I can actually elaborate on that some because I've been doing some reading lately. I had a couple students that asked me questions. So out of curiosity, I did some reading. First of all, that Harjan, the word down there next to Dalit. So Dalit is the word for untouchable, but that Harjan is that's Gandhi's word. The word Gandhi used to describe, and by Gandhi we're talking Mohandas Gandhi. That's what he used to describe the untouchables, means children of God. So he saw them as kind of like irreparably messed up by the caste system. We've kind of built this system that puts them at the opposite end and forces them into the kind of situation they're stuck in. So yes, you're right. The caste system doesn't legally exist anymore. I think it's like the 1940s that it was essentially abolished. However, as we'll get to when we talk about Hinduism, it is very, very closely connected to the religion. And since the religion is still going strong, the caste system still exists. And it tends to hold its sway even when you leave the country. So this was a question I had a student ask: how many untouchables just leave India and go to like the United States and to get away from this? So if you take all the immigration of people from India coming to the United States, 90% of the immigrants coming to the United States are from the Brahmin or Kshatriya caste. 1.5% come from the untouchable caste. And most of them come because they've already now been disowned by their families because they're trying to actually get a better lives for themselves. So they're breaking out of the caste system. They're forgoing their religion to come to the United States. And there was a testimonial on there from this woman who had come to the United States and gotten admitted to college. So she got into college, and she's of course grouped with other students from India as sort of, that's something that we do in the United States. It's kind of a way of helping to integrate people into a new culture. You want to keep them around people that they know and that they would look like and that they're comfortable around. That's the thought. And she said that they would be in a room together with all of these other people from India, and they're going around the room asking people what their caste is, and then they don't even talk to her because they already tell that she is not a Brahmin, which they all were. So they didn't even talk to her. She was beaten, she was bullied, she was sexually assaulted, and all this through her entire time in college. And she said, it really is. It's going back to what happened and what still happens in India today, regardless of the fact that this is illegal or not, because it is still seen as part of the system. And then officials here of the Indian government, of course, say that none of this is true, or it only affects people who recently immigrate to the United States. It's not referring to people who are born here. But how much of that is actually accurate too? You know what I mean? So I'm sure to a degree, this is a problem that people even here in the United States who have come from India can suffer greatly from.
Yeah, that's a crazy story. I mean, she's an outcast, but now she's even more of an outcast because she's in a different country, and she's an outcast of an outcast. Essentially, that's wild. But yeah. So let's talk more about Hinduism. This will start to make a little more sense, and this is probably one of the more interesting things I think that we talk about in India itself, but it's probably one of the more complicated things in general.
Right, because the first question that always comes up when you look at that caste system is like, well, if you're an untouchable and your life sucks that bad, like everything we've just described, if your life is that terrible, why not just try to make your life better? Why not, kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just, the American way, you go from the bottom to the top, pull an Alexander Hamilton or Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you know what I mean? Like lift yourself up from where you are to the highest status you can get to. And that sounds great, and it does happen here, but this is the exact reason that doesn't happen in India.
So it's samsara. This is what's called reincarnation. You might be familiar with this. It's the process of rebirth. So when you die, your soul is essentially transported into a newborn baby, like simultaneously. You have no recollection of your previous life, and you are now starting that new life in that new body. This is the belief. Now, how do you get this new body where are you ranking in your pyramid, right? Maybe you are moving up the pyramid, maybe you're moving down the pyramid, the social pyramid. The only way to do it is to die. And that's always that when I say that, the kids are always like, wait, what? So you can't move up or down until you die? How's that make sense? Well, it does if you believe in reincarnation. So, but how would you be born into a higher class? There's two ways. I'm going to circle back to the ending, but let's talk about, you want to talk about karma?
Yeah, so karma is, a lot of people are familiar with karma, right? If you do something good will happen to you, is how we tend to envision that. In India, karma is essentially the totality of your good and bad deeds. So if you just kind of kept a tally sheet going on, so every time you do something good, put a mark next to the plus. If every time you do something bad, put a mark next to the minus. And when your life is at an end, that's essentially weighed against itself to see whether you did more good things or bad things, and to what degree that's going to impact your overall rebirth. The more negative things you've done, the less likely you are to move up. Perhaps you stay in the same, or perhaps you're taking a step down the ladder.
Yeah, in that pyramid. But it's not just karma. There's something else that goes with it. And luckily, it rhymes because it's dharma. So dharma is your duty. And what this means is, and this is what Mr. Woods was talking about, that girl was a girl, right?
Mm-hmm.
That went to America to, try to make a better life for herself. She wasn't performing her dharma. Her duty was to be an outcast, to not pull herself up by her bootstraps, to, be the pooper scooper, to be the lantern cleaner, to be the outcast of society. That is what you have been born into. You are not to move up. You can't go. I don't think you can go any further than outcast, right? You can't go any further down. So
unless I don't know where, I know they do believe in reincarnation as animals. I assume those are
if you go that
low.
route, yeah.
But I know that no matter where you are, you could be a Brahmin, and if you are breaking your dharma, you go all the way to untouchable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the quick way to get into the worst spot possible.
Yeah. So it's keeping everyone, you have the right amount of every person, right? You have the right amount of Brahmins, right amount of Kshatriyas and Vaisyas and Sudras and untouchables. Everyone is uniquely put in this position and they stay in that position. There is no, like Mr. Wood said, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. So if you do eventually, you've got good karma, you've done your dharma, and you're a Brahmin. You've been born into, you've been doing it great. And you think, well, I've made it. I made it to the Brahmin class, the highest class. I must have been awesome in my previous lives to get here, building up and building up. It's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal in Hinduism is moksha. And this is perfect understanding. And you are released from this reincarnation because you don't want to keep being reborn because, as we'll learn in Buddhism, life is suffering. There are many forms of suffering, and you're eventually going to get old and die. And we know that no matter what in life, you will suffer. So let's try to break from that. And this is what moksha is. You're no longer being reincarnated. And the way I kind of help my students to remember it is moksha kind of sounds like milkshake. So the ultimate goal is to get a milkshake. I don't know if that'll help you out, but I'm sure we've all had delicious milkshakes before. But this is when you have it's called Atman, which is your individual soul, and then you have Brahman, which is the world soul. When you have this perfect understanding and of this relationship together, that's what moksha really is, this perfect understanding between those two different ideas. So like you understand your soul and you understand Brahman, the world soul. So that would be Hinduism there, that the bulk of what Hinduism is.
The crash course of Hinduism.
Yeah. You want to do some Hinduism or Hindu gods?
Yeah, so this is always the fun one, right? Because we've been talking about monotheism and we've been talking about polytheism, but what we have not talked about is henotheism. So henotheism is the belief that you have one God who is able to incarnate himself or herself in many forms. So up here you can see on the top left, you've got Ganesh, and then to the right is Krishna. And then down below, you have multiple incarnations of Brahma. You've got Vishnu, there's Shiva, there's some that I have. Ganesh is there too. You've got some I have no idea who they are. Kali is not there. Maybe that's Kali. The Kali is the one with the fangs. It's the only way I remember her. But that, yeah, so these manifestations or forms of the Hindu god of Brahma each carry a different role. So Brahma is the creator, and then Vishnu is the destroyer, or I'm sorry, Vishnu is the protector, and Shiva is the destroyer. Yeah. So you've got these various roles that they each perform, like many of the religions we've talked about, right? The gods have different roles. The same is true within Hinduism, and in fact, in a very small sect of Hinduism, Elvis Presley is an incarnation of Brahma. I discovered that they have his
what?
Yes, yeah. There's a picture and his idol in one of the Hindu temples in I forget what the name of the village is. Yes, he's the king of rock and roll after all.
That's fair. That's fair. I did not
So
know
that had to be Brahma that did that.
That's
true. It was so great. It had to be Brahma.
Facts. Yeah, I always remember Shiva because of the TV show The League, and that was what they called the trophy, and that was modeled after one of their Indian friends, Shiva.
Is it the stones of Shiva in Indiana Jones in Temple of Doom?
I don't know, but that's
the stones of something.
Perhaps.
I don't know. That's the one I very rarely can remember. Short Round is the only thing I remember from that movie. And the ripping the heart out.
Yeah, that one's pretty. And then the girl screaming the whole time.
Yes.
That's kind of obnoxious. In henotheism, could it also be the belief in, like, you believe in one specific god, like you understand there's other gods, but you only really pray to one, like maybe you only pray to Vishnu, the protector, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that true, or is that am I wrong on that?
I don't know, and I don't know that I have enough knowledge of it to speak intelligently on it, but I know that in most of the things that I read, Brahma is often the one that's referenced. So Brahma is referenced because he is kind of the chief of these personalities, so to speak.
Yeah.
However, like the Harjan, that word, for example, I said it translates essentially in English to children of God. But it's in Hindi, it's children of Vishnu. So why is Vishnu the one being, invoked there in that term? I'm not sure. So I actually don't know that I can answer that question intelligently.
I thought that, some like Hindus, they'll kind of pick like a particular god, and they will pray, like maybe you have like a family god that you all pray to, like, Vishnu or whatever. But maybe you also simultaneously know that it is an incarnation of, I know the other Brahma. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know.
Possibly, but
maybe your friend will be able to enlighten us.
Yeah, I'm hoping he does. So I would like to know more. So that kind of covers Hinduism.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another religion that has some similarities, but is definitely different. And this, students always kind of get this religion mixed up, but we'll see if we can kind of separate it here. So the founder of Buddhism is Siddhartha Gautama, right? Is it?
I say Gautama, but I don't actually know.
I would say Gautama, but yeah, I've heard both. I'm always about, like, what's the correct way of saying something?
Wait, let's ask British Siri what she thinks.
Is she a little bit biased though by being British?
Maybe, considering India. Siri, who is the first Buddha?
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear you. Could you please repeat what you said?
She's upset with me. Siri, who is the first Buddha?
Here's an answer from wikipedia.org.
No,
Kakyasantha, the first Buddha of the Bhadrakalpa.
Okay. Siri, say Siddhartha Gautama.
Not gonna happen.
She's
Alexa,
silent on the subject.
who's the founder of Buddhism?
Buddhism was founded by Gautama Buddha.
Gautama Buddha. So not Gautama. Gautama.
Well, Gautama, Siddhartha Gautama.
Gautama Buddha. I've never heard of Gautama.
The first name I know is pronounced Siddhartha because I've listened to podcasts with people that are today still named Siddhartha.
Yeah.
But as far as Gautama, I guess I should have asked who is the founder of Buddhism. That probably would have got me a solid aim.
Yeah.
All right, let's go, British Siri. It's your time to shine. Who's the founder of Buddhism?
Here's what I found.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing. It's Gautama Buddha is all that comes up, or Gautama Buddha. She doesn't want to say it.
So, Siddhartha originally came from the Kshatriya caste, and he was. The story goes that I think it was when he was born. I think maybe like a priest or somebody said that your son will be either a great leader, like a king, or he will be a religious leader. But the catch here is if he stays inside the palace walls, he will be a great military leader or a king. But if he ever leaves, he will be a great religious leader. So if you're the dad, I mean, if I guess if you were me, I'd be like, all right, well, whatever happens, he's gonna be having a great life, right?
Right.
But his dad wanted him to be a great military leader, not a religious leader. So he kept him inside the house for as long as he possibly could. Gave him everything he wanted. Gave him, all the different foods. He didn't see really any pain, and all the women that he wanted, and all the different enjoyments that life has to offer. But humans eventually reach a point where that's just not enough. If I said to maybe a student like, hey, you can watch TV all day for the rest of your life, but you can never leave the house, right? We're already experiencing here with like COVID that we want to leave the house, and maybe the first month or two is, we can bear it, but after a couple of months, we start to lose our minds, right? Well, that's kind of what Siddhartha was going through. He had spent like 29 years of his life basically locked up in an awesome palace, wanted to see what else was out there. And he goes on a journey, and he sees an old man, a sick man, and a dead man. And he decides to meditate under a tree for 44 days with like a simple grain of rice, something like that. And he meditates there for 44 days. And when he finally comes out of this meditation stage, he's fasting as well. And he comes out and he reaches what's known as nirvana. And this is, I don't want to say it's similar to moksha because it's definitely different, but it has that kind of same like aha moment, like that, that you've kind of reached that point.
And this is after years of searching and asceticism, and so then it culminates in this period of meditation. And I think that the explanation he gives is related to an instrument, or that he heard from someone passing that kind of struck the note for him, was with the stringed instrument, right? So he's experienced this suffering that occurs in the world, and he's trying to figure out what the best way to not live with suffering is. And the explanation he heard was that if the string is too loose on a stringed instrument, then it won't play. And if you over tighten the string, then it will snap. So it has to be somewhere in between, somewhere in the middle, to play the note properly. And that leads him to his concept of the middle way, between self-denial and indulgence, essentially.
And how did he come to that? What did he come up with? What was his his formula?
Yeah,
so that people could have this.
It really is. It's 4 divided by 8. So you've got the 4 noble truths that he establishes, and this is based off of essentially from seeing the old, the sick, and the dying dead man. He essentially comes to the understanding that suffering exists in the world, And suffering doesn't necessarily mean physical pain. Suffering is just you're lacking your desire. So I explain, or that you have a desire and you're not achieving what you're desiring. So I linked this in class to my mom. Right. So my mom has had these surgeries, and so she's gotten to where she can walk pretty well now, but she's not back to where she was. So part of her suffering, part of this process for her that keeps her awake at night, is that she's not walking as good as she was. Right? She wants to be back where she was before, but cannot achieve that. So she's kind of got that in between, and that's the cause of suffering. Right? Suffering that exists in this world is caused because we want things for ourselves that we can't necessarily have. So Buddha comes to the conclusion that, if suffering exists and it exists because of selfish desire, then to get rid of suffering means you have to get rid of that selfish desire. And I actually linked this in class talking about Chadwick Boseman. Right, Black Panther. He was terminally ill for years, and nobody knew. It was just the stoicism about that is beautiful. But
Incredible.
On top of that, you're essentially that. Like he knew that the end is coming. He's not going to beat this thing, and he had known that for a while. So the fact that you don't see his suffering doesn't mean that he's just hiding it. It might mean that he has just accepted that this is what is going to happen to me. And if I stop wasting my life, what's left of it, trying to want it not to be true, and I just accept that it is, then that helps to alleviate that suffering that I'm experiencing.
That was definitely a shock, but you're absolutely right that way he suffered in silence, I guess, is like the way to put it. Maybe not even suffer. Maybe he, like you said, just accepted it for what it is and lived every day like it was his last. So the Four Noble Truth: life is filled with suffering and sorrow. The cause of all that suffering is your desire, your selfish desire for temporary pleasures in the world, whatever that may be. Think of all the things that you really enjoy, and if you don't have those things, then you'll suffer.
And this scales to all levels. From the poor person who simply wants bread to the incredibly wealthy person who like to Jay Leno, who wants to add one more car to his collection. You know what I mean? So it scales definitely.
His garage is huge. He has so many cars. The way to end all this suffering is to end all your desires, but that's easier said than done. You can't be like, okay, I ended all my desires, easy. All right, now no more suffering. But you need this like willpower beyond anything you've ever had before. And how do you get this, this sense of being this willpower, whatever you want to call it? Well, Siddhartha laid out the last one. And the last one is the way to overcome your desires is to attain the enlightenment, is to follow the eightfold path. This is called the middle way, like Mr. Woods was saying, between your desire and self-denial. And what I do to help people remember this is I call it the noble number. The noble number is 48 because there are four noble truths. And the fourth noble truth is the eightfold path, right? It's the middle way between everything. And this is why they have the 8 spokes on the wheel for this. If you've ever seen an image of this, I don't know if you have an image of this here. Yeah, you do. Okay.
Do I have an image?
You have an image.
Ye of little faith.
Do you want to talk about this delightful image?
Yeah, so this is actually one of my favorite things to talk about, because the more I have come to kind of look into mindfulness, the more some of this has made sense. But I use my wife as an example of how difficult this really is, because my wife is an incredibly honest person, and I love her for that. And she will be honest about everything to anyone at any time, no matter what. So the right view, the concept of knowing the truth and being willing to accept that, she has that part down. The right speech, however, to say nothing that's going to hurt other people, that part is a little bit more fuzzy, because you know what? Sometimes it just comes out and you just say what's true and it's out there and now everybody knows, and it's great to be transparent, but it is not following the eightfold path. You are going to cause yourself suffering there. and you're definitely going to inflict suffering on other people whose selfish desire there is that your mouth had just stayed shut. So the right intentions and that kind of pairs with the right effort, right? So that you intend no evil and you resist evil if possible. That the choices you make and the deeds you do in your life are for the good of others and the benefit of others, and you attempt to try and respect life. It doesn't necessarily mean like you have to be a full-on vegan, right? So you can respect life and eat animals. One doesn't preclude the other. However, most Buddhists who tend to be vegan, if they're trying to follow it or adhere to it very closely. And then on top of that, you've got meditation and the process of mindfulness, the kind of abandonment of the self, because the ultimate cause of suffering is yourself, and the desires therein. So if you can find a way to abandon yourself, even temporarily, that's your glimpse of nirvana. That you've essentially alleviated everything, and you're just experiencing what arises as it arises, and there's your release from all suffering.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of insightful in the Eightfold Path itself. Like, if you could follow just any of them, like you're literally on the right path, right? And if you could follow all eight, you're a human being that is unlike most people in the world. To be able to fulfill all eight. But that's kind of one of the joys of life, is to be in pursuit of something, whatever religion may be. But I can think any religion here would kind of adhere to any of those, right? I don't think every religion out there would be. Maybe there is. I mean, there is. Like, but it's a bad. And how do I describe this? There's probably a religion out there that would be seek evil. You know what I mean? It'd be the kind of opposites.
Right.
There's a religion for everything. So most religions are on the righteous path. Let's just leave it at that. But this made Siddhartha, Gautama, I gave him the name Buddha, which means the enlightened one. So he now has like a guidebook, how to reach nirvana, how to become enlightened in one lifetime. And this is one of the benefits. You don't have to die like you did in Hinduism. Like, you could do it in one lifetime. You could achieve nirvana. In Hinduism, you have to die maybe thousands of times in order to get to this point, and you would not even know. So again, the ultimate goal is this release from this pain and suffering is nirvana. And you can achieve this in one lifetime. There are two different sections of Buddhism. They kind of split off from one another. And Buddhism really doesn't catch on that well in India, and really predominantly takes hold in places like China and Japan and Taiwan and places like that. And to this day, it still is a big part of those countries. But the two different sections, Theravada is the school of elders, and Mahayana is the great vehicle. What's the difference of what makes them? Is Mahayana just more like traditional?
So the Theravada Buddhism views Buddha as the founder, not only the founder of Buddhism, but also as the Buddha, as the teacher, the one who brought this knowledge to them. Whereas the followers of Mahayana Buddhism see him as almost being deified, that he had achieved this godlike status. So Theravada Buddhism is more what you tend to see being practiced in like Nepal and Tibet. Mahayana Buddhism is practiced in China, Southeast Asia, and into Japan. So there's kind of the further east you get, the more Buddha becomes, I guess, sort of exotic, and therefore is associated with being deified.
Which
in Hinduism even actually makes Buddha a form of Brahma to add to their retinue, along with Presley and others. I have to look up that village's name now, just because I have to share that. But yeah,
that's interesting too, because like the further away you get from the source, geez, the further you get away from it, it's kind of like telephone, where the information is lost. I won't say it's lost, but it's interpreted differently, and you have him becoming a god the further away he is from the source.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering if that's probably maybe why that the Mahayana is there. They consider it more of a god than anything else.
Okay, so in one small town in the Indian state of Karnataka, a picture of Elvis Presley hangs beside pictures of other Hindu gods, according to the India Today magazine. The faithfully reported to worship Elvis just like the other deities after he died in 1977. Okay. The temple is attached to the home of a man who published a booklet last year. So this was in 96, by the way. So last year was 1995. That was a long time ago. Look, thinking back, like that was 25 years ago. God, we're old. So the booklet last year under Elvis's name entitled "Why My Daughter Married Michael Jackson." So yeah. Not entirely sure what's going on there, but yes. So in a small town in India, Elvis is among the deified. Yeah. So there you have it.
Nice, good for Elvis.
Yeah, I mean he is the god of rock and roll.
Yeah,
Now, not the king.
That's quite the title. No longer the king. He could be the pharaoh of rock and roll. Kind of a god.
Double dip.
So moving on, that's Buddhism in a nutshell, and those are the two religions from India, Hinduism and Buddhism. And we talked just here briefly about how Buddhism transports itself to other countries like China and Japan and so forth. But two times during India's existence, during this ancient period, that they were unified, like all of India, of what you saw in the beginning with the geography, they were unified. The first Indian empire was founded by Chandragupta Maurya. This is the Mauryan Empire from 322 BC to 185 BCE.
So I'm going to save some confusion when we go on, just up front. So don't pay attention to the first name. He is Chandragupta Maurya. Therefore, he is associated with the Mauryan Empire. Makes sense, right? He is the founder of the empire that has his last name. Save yourself a headache. Last name is important. Anyway, carry on, Mr. Shank.
Well, this starts when he defeated the Greek armies. Seleucus I, one of Alexander's former generals, which we haven't talked about that yet, but this will make sense here in the coming weeks when we talk about Greece and Alexander. So when he fends off Alexander, that's kind of when this empire really begins.
Or if you're an ardent podcast consumer, you can listen ahead because that one we do have recorded.
That's true. Yeah, you're right.
You are ahead of the game now, so you can
went.
listen to. I don't even know what that sounds like. You can listen to us talk about Alexander from 3 years ago, 4 years ago, something. Yeah. We've been doing this a while. This is our best. I think this might be our best streak here. This lately.
I think so. Yeah, I'd have to go back and look at the dates, but I think it's our best streak. Not bad. Many more to come.
Yes.
The Mauryan contributions include art, architecture, and warfare, government. So really with the Mauryan Empire, they are the first Indian empire we consider an empire.
Mm-hmm.
They use that bureaucratic form of government that we have already talked about. Yeah, with Persia. Yeah, we did talk about with Persia.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll talk about throughout this entire year how you're using government workers to run your empire efficiently, this imperial bureaucracy. And this is what it makes it easier once you have a set of laws and so forth set up, which they did because they introduced very strict laws and very strict punishments to go with it. This I don't think to the level of intensity of Hammurabi, right? But
no, I don't believe so. But I think I actually have a couple of examples from that. I'm trying to pull it up as I speak. But I believe. Let me see. Let me find it. But yes, I believe I have a couple things that will kind of
Is
relate
this like
to that.
one of the laws where in Pennsylvania, if you sleep on top of your fridge?
100%, because that's I was trying to actually come up with a rationale for that the one day. I was trying to think about like why that might be
All right, yeah. Let me hear
a
yours. And I'll
concern.
tell you mine.
So okay, so right, so I think it's specific to being outside that you're not
It
allowed
is.
to
It is.
sleep. Okay, so here's my thought is we're trying to, you know, keep people from risky behavior. So sleeping on top of a refrigerator outside, you've got exposed electrical, you've got metal, um, you've got the potential of a fall and an electric shock. I think it might have just, and I don't know what idiots outside sleeping on top of a refrigerator anyway, but
Something
could this be a law that was just created uh, purely for the benefit of the people? We're just looking out for one another. That's my thought on it.
I think it's very plausible. Probably more plausible than mine.
I'm probably giving humanity too much credit, though. To be fair,
To be fair,
To be
my
fair.
my thought was that somebody is obviously sleeping on top of the refrigerator outside, and you're gonna look at that, right? You're
As
gonna
we all
drive
do.
down the road and you're like, "What is that?" And then you're gonna look, stare, and then you crush somebody else in a car or somebody else in the street.
Ooh,
And yeah, it's like something that's just too distracting, right? For other
interesting.
people. So that was my theory.
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't considered that.
Good question.
So I was actually somewhat ahead of the game here when I was talking. So these aren't necessarily laws that I'm talking about. These are the edicts of the next king, the grandson of Chandragupta. So I'll let you go on to him, and then I can go through what some of these are.
All
This
right.
is all stuff that I added this year. I don't remember what spurred me to do this. I guess I'm just an ever evolving wealth of random information.
So the Mauryan Empire, the most famous Mauryan ruler, was Chandragupta's grandson, Asoka Maurya. He improved the empire by urging religious tolerance and building an elaborate road system. Now, essentially, and the story goes that Ahsoka was watching a battle unfold and watching the carnage, the death and pain and suffering, and thought, this can't be it. There's got to be a religion out there that is peaceful and that will make us not tear each other apart. And he found that in Buddhism. So Ahsoka is also responsible for the spread of Buddhism to China. So a huge part that China and Japan and all those other countries that have Buddhism inside them today owed a major debt to Ahsoka because of one man's kind of thoughtful process here. They owe their religion too because he spread it because it pretty much died out in India at that point. And he picked it up and basically pumped it back to life, and it's here today because of Ahsoka. So Ahsoka
Mhm.
spread Buddhism. Oh yeah, I see on here with the Kalinga. That's right, the Battle of Kalinga.
Mhm.
He converted to Buddhism. The message of nonviolence. Like we gotta cut this stuff out. Got to cut the crap, right? So, and he sent missionaries throughout Asia, and these missionaries, their mission was to promote and get people to convert to Buddhism. So he'll heavy taxes led to rebellions in the empire, and it broke into smaller kingdoms after him. But really, what he is known for is spreading Buddhism throughout China.
Yeah, and so like I said, to kind of build on that, when we talk about that elaborate road system, I was actually reading a little bit more about this. So imagine something like the Persian Royal Road, except what he did is along the way, rather than having like relays for horses, they planted these groves of fruit trees, so that weary travelers on the road could actually find food to eat off of these fruit trees that would just be planted in groves and were public access essentially for anybody wandering by that was hungry could find food there, which is in line with the message of Buddhism that you're supposed to be doing right by your fellow man essentially. And then on top of that, so he along the way as his missionaries are going about and he's expanding eastward and getting new territories or kind of unifying those territories. There were these pillars erected that are known as Asoka's edicts. So they had basically laws, more or less, or things that are associated with that. So a lot of these are going to sound familiar, like practicing Buddhism was one of the things that he was encouraging his people to do, to have and hold the right behavior, to be benevolent, to be kind to prisoners, to respect the animal life, and look out for animal welfare. A belief in a world after this, not necessarily reincarnation, that you believe that there's something else out there. And having officers of the faith, people whose job it was to spread the religion, but then also whose job it was to further encourage those people to continue to spread the religion. Kind of there's your pyramid scheme, and offering medical treatment to people along the way. So these are things that that Ahsoka put out there as essentially the kind of new face of the Mauryan Empire, how it was going to operate.
Classic Ahsoka. Classic.
Clearly, not to be confused with Ahsoka Tano from Star Wars.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I probably have a minifigure of Ahsoka Tano around.
I'm sure
that
she's
board
around.
game.
The other empire here is the Gupta Empire, and the dates here are 320 CE to 550 CE. So you've got a little bit. So America's 244 years old. They're 230 years old. So we've made it longer, 14 years longer than the Gupta Empire. But it's the thing, like empires come and go, countries come and go. Who knows when a certain country will fall, but nothing is forever. But we'll see how long we can last. So they only last 230 years. The Gupta Empire, or do you want to take over this one because you were talking?
No, please.
Okay.
I'll chime in with the math.
Okay.
Well, actually, I shouldn't override you on math. Of all people, I don't have room to speak.
I'm a number ninja. I'm Math Jesus here. Okay. The Gupta Empire was founded by Chandragupta, no relation.
You can tell how fed up I got with being asked that every year that I finally just put it in the PowerPoint and was like, be done with it.
Surprised it's not like bold and in red and like angry emoji or something by it. The Gupta ushered in India's golden age, which marks a time of great prosperity and achievement. I look at the Gupta, think of like Gupta golden. So like the two G's here, and you think, okay, well, if they're a golden age, that must mean that great things are happening, right? It's a time of prosperity, maybe peace and economic growth and social growth, maybe. The Gupta is based here, a lot of their achievements, but the focal point we're going to stick with is numbers and achievements in math. So they came up with the concept of zero, and it's not as if they didn't know, like, oh yeah, 5 minus 5 is nothing, but now they actually have a placeholder for it, the actual like O that you would see. And then they kind of constructed decimals. So, you could have 31.1, but there's also 31.125, and just keep going, place values on and on. Like there's numbers almost like that are hidden behind numbers. And that decimal was a way of showing that. And so they created that. I'm sure you've learned that in math class. And
are you sure? Can you be so sure?
Very sure.
Making assumptions now.
Yeah, it's true. Who knows?
This is in math. It's the safest statement we can
make. That's a fair statement. That's an accurate statement. It's in math. It's in math. And pi, pi, right? 3.14. It would be a circle, right? all the way around. So you have what radius is halfway, right? Diameter is the full across. So circumference. So
because the formula to find out the circumference from the radius is pi r squared, and then pi d is to figure it out from the diameter. I don't know. My geometry is I've gotten to that point. My math teachers from high school would be furious with me even discussing this.
How dare you? How dare you? I don't think. Well, I'm going to mention it here while we're talking about numbers. So they came up with a number system. It does. You can kind of make it out what it looks like. You know, their Indian numerals. It would look similar to, I would say, ours, but you'll learn it's going to be the Arabic numerals, which is what we use.
Yeah,
it's just a simpler form of numbers, you know,
and that's more or less because you're going to see Arab conquest of that region. Like we said, I mean, today where the Indus River Valley is actually within the country of Pakistan. So that's, you know, those are Arab Muslims living in that territory predominantly, not everyone, of course, but you do have some Hindus in there, but for the most part. The other thing I would add with the math, so I was sitting here kind of thinking about this, that the Gupta Empire really is a contemporary of Rome, the Roman Empire at this time, right? So like Rome is kind of in its downward trend by the time the Gupta Empire comes into existence. But so take Rome's math. So the Romans didn't have a zero concept. So when the Romans count, they count the space in between numbers. So, you know, they count 1, and you can see this when you look at their calendar system. The number 1 for them is from 1 to 2. So when you're going into 2, you're actually counting 1 for the first time. So we would count from 0 to 1 is 1, and then 1 to 2 is 2. They counted from 1 to 2 is 1, from 2 to 3 is 2. So that's why if you look at like the calendars, the way their calendars are set up, you actually have to like count days twice in order to make it work out the way we would have it work today. It's very messy.
Yeah. So imagine trying to do math class with Roman numerals.
Yes.
No bueno. The end of the Gupta comes after many invasions, which led to the empire breaking into smaller kingdoms, similar to the Mauryan Empire. The next Indian Empire will not come until an Islamic power known as the Mughals. That will be around 1500 CE. 1500 CE, which is what we go up to. All right. Well, that's been a journey, right, Mr. Woods?
Whew, a great journey. Almost as though we traveled across a subcontinent.
Oh, well, we took the middle way.
Yes, indeed.
All right. So this has been In the Back Room. I'm Mr. Shank.
And I'm Mr. Woods.
And the cause of fear is ignorance.